The rain battered the Wyoming plains, a relentless assault that turned the earth to mud and the night to chaos. For 12 years, Samuel Harrow had lived alone on his sprawling ranch, his only companions the creak of his porch and the lowing of his cattle. But on this stormy night in 1887, 9 Cheyenne women appeared at his gate, soaked and desperate, pleading for refuge. Their pursuers, a band of rogue cavalrymen, were close behind, so close Samuel could almost hear their horses over the howling wind. The choice he faced would unravel the solitude he'd built and force him to confront a past he'd buried long ago. Samuel sat by the hearth, the fire casting shadows across his weathered face. He was mending a rope, his fingers moving with the precision of a man who'd learned to fix what the world broke. The storm outside was a beast, rattling the shutters and drowning out the world. Then came the knocking, sharp, insistent, not the casual rap of a neighbor, but the sound of lives hanging by a thread. He stiffened, the rope slipping from his hands. No one came to Harrow's ranch, not since he'd made it clear he wanted no part of the townsfolk, the law, or the memories that clung to him like damp earth. The knocking came again, louder, accompanied by voice soft but urgent, speaking in Cheyenne, a language he hadn't heard since the day his world shattered. 12 years ago, Cheyenne raiders had taken his wife, Eliza, and their son, Caleb, in a raid that left his heart as barren as the plains in winter. His hand drifted to the shotgun propped against the wall, a reflex born of nights spent waiting for ghosts. But something in those voice bleeding, not threatening, made him pause. They weren't the war cries he'd heard in his nightmares. These were the voices of people with nowhere left to turn. He rose, his boots heavy on the oak floor, and approached the door. Through the wood, he heard a woman's voice, speaking English with a cadence like river stones. "Please, we know you're there. We need shelter. Just for tonight." Samuel pressed his hand against the door, feeling the vibration of her words. 12 years of isolation had honed his instincts, and they screamed danger not from the women, but from whatever had driven them to his doorstep in a storm that could kill in minutes. He thought of Eliza, her gentle insistence that trust was the only thing that kept men from becoming beasts. But Eliza was gone, and trust had died with her on a morning when he'd opened his door to the wrong strangers. The voice came again, closer now, as if the speaker's lips were pressed to the wood. "They're coming. If you don't help us, we'll die out here. And when they find us at your gate, you'll die too." Samuel's hand hovered over the iron bolt that barred his door. In 12 years, he'd never lifted it for anyone. But the certainty in that voice, the weight of it, told him tonight would be different. Beyond his ranch, in the storm's heart, men were closing in. And once they arrived, the life he'd built in solitude would never be the same. The bolt was heavier than it should have been, rusted from years of disuse. When he slid it free, the door groaned open, revealing a sight that seared itself into his memory. 9 Cheyenne women stood on his porch, their traditional clothing torn and mud-streaked, some with wounds that bled dark against the wet fabric. The youngest, barely a woman, clutched a bundle that stirred faintly, a baby, its breath shallow in the cold. The eldest, her hair streaked with gray, had eyes that carried the weight of too many losses. But it was the woman who'd spoken who held his gaze. She stood apart, her chin high despite the exhaustion carved into her face. A gash above her brow wept blood, and her dress was torn at the shoulder. But her eyes met his without fear. "I am Neela," she said, her English deliberate and clear. "These are my kinsisters' daughters, our people. We've been running for days." Samuel opened his mouth, but no words came. Questions piled up where they'd come from, why they were alone, who was chasing them, but the baby's pale face silenced him. Some things mattered more than answers. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. They moved quickly, like shadows slipping into the firelight, filling his small cabin with the scent of rain and fear. For 12 years, his home had been his fortress, a bulwark against a world that had taken everything. Now it felt too small, crowded with these women who brought the metallic tang of blood and the weight of their story. Neela was the last to enter, and as she passed, she spoke softly. "The men hunting us are close. An hour, maybe less. They won't stop until we're all dead." Samuel barred the door again, knowing it was a futile gesture now. His sanctuary was no longer his own, reached not by force, but by a choice he hadn't expected to make. "Why?" he asked, turning to Neela. "Why are they after you?" Her eyes met his, and in them he saw a pain he knew too well, kind that came from losing everything. "Because we survived," she said. "Because we fought back when they burned our village and killed our men. Because one of their leaders, Captain Harrowell, can't let us live to tell what he did to my niece." Samuel's stomach twisted. He'd known men like Harrowell soldiers who wore honor like a mask but left bodies in their wake. "How many are coming?" he asked. 10, maybe 12, Neela replied. "Led by Harrowell. He's been raiding Cheyenne camps for months, calling us threats to settlers. But his real fear is anyone who might speak of his crimes." Samuel moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. The storm raged on, hiding any sign of movement, but he knew better than to trust the darkness. Killers like Harrowell moved unseen, especially when they thought their prey was cornered. He turned back to the women, now gathered near the fire, tending wounds and comforting the youngest among them. They weren't warriors, but survivors, and survival sometimes demanded more than courage. "There's a root cellar under the kitchen," he said to Neela. "Stone walls, hidden trapdoor. It could hold you all, but it'll be tight." Neela shook her head. "If they find us, you die with us. If they find an empty house with signs we were here, they might believe you weren't involved. We won't make you their enemy." Samuel's laugh was bitter. "Too late for that. I became their enemy the day I walked away from their world. The only question now is whether we run or make them pay for coming here." Something shifted in Neela's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or a spark of hope. Outside, the storm was easing, and with it, the cover that had shielded them. Over the fading wind, Samuel heard the faint sound of hooves in the mud and the low murmur of men who thought they'd trapped their prey. The sound of approaching riders cut through the night like a blade. Samuel moved quickly, grabbing his shotgun and a tin of shells from a locked chest. But as he turned, he saw something that stopped him cold. Neela stood taller now, her posture no longer that of a desperate fugitive, but of a leader. In her hand was a knife, its blade catching the firelight with a deadly glint. The other women had changed to some held weapons, hidden beneath their tattered dresses. Others moved with the quiet precision of those who'd fought before. "You're not helpless," Samuel said, realization dawning. "We never were," Neela replied, her voice hard as flint. "But sometimes it's better to let men think what they want. Harrowell expects frightened women who'll beg for mercy. He's about to learn otherwise." The youngest woman, clutching the baby, moved to the back of the house with 2 others, as if following a plan they'd rehearsed. Samuel understood then that he wasn't sheltering refugees, was aiding warriors who'd chosen his ranch for a reason. "How many men have you killed?" he asked Neela. Her eyes held no shame. "Enough to know Harrowell's men aren't the first to underestimate us. They won't be the last, but they'll be the most surprised." Outside, the voices grew clearer, men coordinating their approach through the rain. Samuel counted at least 8 distinct voices, maybe more. Trained soldiers, but on unfamiliar ground, hunting prey they'd misjudged. "The cellar," he said again, but Neela shook her head. "We run, and they hunt us forever. We hide, and they search until they find us. But if we end this here, the chase stops." Samuel felt a clarity he hadn't known in years, cold focus that came before a fight, when survival stripped away everything but necessity. These women hadn't come to his ranch by chance. They'd chosen this place, this night, this storm, because they knew the man he'd once been, a man who'd fought in the war, who'd built defenses into this land that only he understood. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Neela's smile was sharp as her blade. "Harrowell expects helpless women. Instead, he'll find us. But when his men see a rancher fighting with Cheyenne, they'll hesitate. That hesitation will be their end." A horse snorted close to the house, and boots splashed through the mud. Someone was circling the building, checking for exits, planning their attack. Samuel checked his shotgun, ensuring it was loaded. Eliza's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that kindness was what separated men from beasts. But kindness, he was learning, sometimes meant fighting to protect the innocent. "There's something else," Neela said softly. "If we survive this, you can't stay here. Harrowell's death will bring questions. Soldiers, maybe worse. They'll come for you." Samuel nodded. He'd known that the moment he opened his door. 12 years of peace were ending tonight, but maybe that was how it was meant to be. Maybe some men weren't meant to hide forever. Outside, a voice cut through the storm, arrogant, certain of victory. "I know you're in there. Come out now, and we'll make this quick." Captain Harrowell had arrived. Expecting an easy slaughter, Samuel positioned himself by the window, while Neela and 3 women faded into the shadows of the room. The others had vanished to the back of the house, setting up defenses to confuse any assault. "Rancher," Harrowell's voice boomed again. "We're tracking fugitives. Open this door, or you're harboring enemies of the United States." Through the shutters, Samuel saw shapes moving in the dark, soldiers spreading out, cutting off escape routes. They thought they were surrounding a cabin of frightened women and a lone rancher. Neela appeared beside him, silent as a ghost. "The one by the stable," she whispered. "That's Sergeant Cole. He was there when they killed my brother." "The one by the well, that's Corporal Vance. He held my niece while Harrowell." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Samuel felt a familiar rage rise in his chest, same fury that had kept him alive through years of grief. These weren't soldiers, they were predators in uniform. And predators only understood one language. "How do you want to do this?" he asked. "Harrowell will come through the front door, always does. Wants to see his victims fear. His men will hit the back and sides, expecting us to cower. They won't expect to fight." She handed him a small, polished stone, smooth and cold. "When you see this signal, take Harrowell. We'll handle the rest." Samuel was about to ask what signal when a new voice broke through the storm, young, uncertain. Not like the others. "Captain, maybe we should just search and move on. Could be just some rancher weathering the storm." Harrowell's laugh was cruel. "Private Ellis, their tracks led here. 9 women, bleeding, running scared. They're inside, and so is anyone fool enough to help them. We do this my way." Samuel heard rifles being readied, safeties clicking off. The fight was coming now. If you were Samuel, what would you do? Open the door and try to talk to men who'd already decided to kill everyone inside? Or trust these Cheyenne women who'd turned your home into a battlefield? The choice would decide whether justice or murder ruled the night. Samuel made his choice. The front door burst inward as Harrowell kicked it open, his rifle raised. But instead of finding helpless women, he met the barrel of Samuel's shotgun. For a moment, confusion flashed across the captain's face. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. That moment was all Neela needed. The stone gleamed in the firelight, a signal flashing to the women in the shadows. The storm muffled what followed, the whisper of blades, the stifled gasps of men who died before they could cry out. Harrowell's eyes widened as he realized he'd walked into a trap, but it was too late. Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, Neela materialized behind the captain, her knife finding his heart with deadly precision. "This is for my niece," she whispered, her blade sinking deep. Harrowell dropped his rifle, clutching at the wound. "And for every woman you thought too weak to fight." As he fell, a new sound pierced the storm. More horses, more voices. Harrowell hadn't come alone. Reinforcements were closing in, and the real battle was just beginning. The sound of approaching hooves froze the air in Samuel Harrow's Wyoming cabin, where the body of Captain Harrowell still bled onto the floorboards. The storm that had cloaked the night's violence was fading, but the danger was far from over. Samuel gripped his shotgun, his eyes locked on Neela, the Cheyenne woman whose knife had ended Harrowell's reign of terror. 9 Cheyenne women, survivors of a burned village, stood ready in the shadows of his home, their weapons gleaming with purpose. They had won a battle, but the war was charging toward them, dozens of riders, torches cutting through the drizzle, and a new voice barking orders with the weight of military authority. Samuel's choice to open his door to these women had shattered 12 years of solitude, and now, with reinforcements closing in, he realized the night would demand more than courage. It would demand everything. The air inside the cabin was thick with the scent of blood and rain-soaked wool. Neela wiped her blade clean on Harrowell's coat, her face unreadable as she listened to the approaching riders. "More than we thought," she whispered, her voice steady despite the odds. 15, maybe 20. They heard the fight. They know Harrowell's dead. Samuel peered through a gap in the shutters, his heart pounding as torchlight flickered across the muddy expanse of his ranch. The riders were spreading out, forming a loose circle round the house-standard military tactics to trap their prey. But these weren't the sloppy mercenaries Harrowell had led. These men moved with discipline, their silhouettes sharp against the fading storm. Samuel's mind raced, weighing options that all seemed to end in blood. Fight and die, surrender and die slower, or find a way to turn the hunter into the hunted. He turned to Neela, who stood near the hearth, her eyes scanning her women as they checked their weapons, knives, a stolen pistol, even a sharpened hoe. The youngest, Leela, clutched her baby, whose faint breaths were a reminder of what was at stake. "We can't hold them off," Samuel said. "Not this many. Not in a straight fight." Neela's gaze met his, hard and unyielding. "We don't run. Not again. For days we've been hunted, our children starving, our wounds bleeding. If we flee now, they'll track us until we're all dead." Samuel's jaw tightened. He thought of Eliza, his wife, whose trust in strangers had cost her life 12 years ago. He'd spent those years building walls literal and other was to keep the world out. Now, those walls were crumbling, and he was standing shoulder to shoulder with women who'd chosen to fight rather than die quietly. "There's another way," he said, moving toward a trapdoor hidden beneath a rug in the kitchen. Not the cellar to hide, but to outsmart them. He lifted the trapdoor, revealing a narrow tunnel carved into the earth. "I dug this years ago," he explained. "Leads to a ravine behind the barn. Used it to store supplies during the war, when raiders came through. It's tight, but it'll get us out without them seeing." Nila's eyes narrowed, assessing. "And then what? They'll burn this place to the ground when they find it empty." Samuel's voice was low, resolute. "Let them. This ranch stopped being a home the day I buried my family. But there's a dam up the hill, built to control spring floods. If we take it out during this storm, the valley below fills with water 10 feet deep in minutes. Anyone caught down there drowns." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the women. Leela, holding her baby, spoke first, her voice trembling but firm. "You'd destroy your land for us? Your life?" Samuel looked around the cabin, its walls etched with memories of Eliza's laughter and Caleb's small footsteps. "It's not a life if it's just hiding. Some things matter more than land." He echoed words Eliza used to say, words he'd forgotten until tonight. Neela nodded, understanding dawning. "The dam, then. But we need time to get there, and we need them to stay in the valley." Outside, the riders' voices grew louder, their torches now close enough to cast light through the broken door. "Harrowell's dead," a voice bellowed, deep and commanding. "This is Major Vance. Surrender now, or we burn you out and hang what's left." Samuel's blood ran cold. Vance wasn't like Harrowell. His voice carried the weight of a man who'd planned this night, who'd let Harrowell die to justify a larger slaughter. Neela leaned close, her whisper urgent. "Vance is worse than Harrowell. He's the one who ordered our village burned, who let his men take what they wanted. He won't stop until we're all gone." "Then we don't give him the chance," Samuel said, his mind sharpening with the clarity of survival. He turned to the women. "Half of you make noise, hear gunshots, shouting, anything to make them think we're barricaded. The rest, with me to the dam. We move fast, through the tunnel." Neela divided her group with a nod. For women, including Leela with the baby, would stay to create the distraction. The other Snyla, to sisters named Mara and Tana, and an older woman called Sana followed Samuel to the trapdoor. As they descended into the damp, earthen tunnel, the sound of gunfire erupted above, the women in the cabin firing into the air to draw Vance's men closer. The tunnel was claustrophobic, its walls slick with mud, but Samuel knew every inch. He led the way, his lantern casting flickering shadows as they crawled toward the ravine. Behind them, the gunfire grew sporadic, mixed with shouts from Vance's men as they tightened their circle around the house. Samuel prayed the distraction would hold long enough. They emerged in the ravine, hidden by a thicket of sagebrush. The dam was a quarter-mile uphill, a sturdy structure of logs and stone Samuel had built a decade ago to tame the spring floods. The rain had swollen the creek behind it, and if they could break the dam, the valley where Vance's men were positioned would become a death trap. But as they crept through the wet brush, a new sound stopped them, a child's cry, sharp and terrified. Coming from the direction of the soldiers' camp, Samuel froze, his heart lurching. It wasn't Lila's baby, this was another child, caught in the chaos of this night. Neela grabbed his arm, her grip fierce. It could be a trap. They've used children before to lure us out. But Samuel shook his head. He'd heard that cry before, in the moments after Eliza and Caleb were taken. It was real, raw, the sound of innocence trapped in a world of violence. "There's a child out there," he said. "We can't blow the dam if it means killing them. Then we all die," Tana hissed, her knife glinting in the lantern light. "My sister's baby is in that house. Her life matters as much as whoever's out there." Samuel met her gaze, seeing the same pain he carried. "I know, but if we kill a child to save ourselves, we're no better than Vance." He set down the dynamite he'd grabbed from a hidden cache in the tunnel explosives he'd kept from his days building railroads and fighting wars. "There's another way. We make them think we're trapped, draw them into the open, and use the land against them." Nila's eyes searched his, weighing his words. "How?" "This ranch is a fortress," Samuel said. "I spent years making sure no one could take it from me. Tripwires in the grass, caltrops hidden in the mud, bear traps where the paths narrow. We lead Vance's men into those defenses, thin their numbers, and get that child out before we blow the dam." The women exchanged glances, their faces a mix of doubt and determination. Sona, the eldest, spoke up, her voice rough as gravel. "You're asking us to trust you, rancher. A man we don't know, on land we don't know. Why should we?" "Because I've lost everything to men like Vance," Samuel said. "And because I'm not letting another child die on my watch." Neela nodded slowly. "Tell us the plan." Samuel outlined it quickly, his voice low as the soldiers' shouts grew closer. The women in the house would keep up the distraction, firing and shouting to make Vance think they were making a last stand. Samuel, Neela, and the others would flank the soldiers' camp, using the ranch's hidden defenses to take out the reserve force and find the child. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all they had. As they moved through the ravine, the child's cries grew clearer, coming from a supply wagon near the soldiers' camp. Samuel signaled for the women to stay low as he crept closer. Through the drizzle, he saw a woman hunched over a small bundle, whispering frantically to calm the crying infant. She wasn't a soldier's wife. Her clothes marked her as a camp follower, likely a cook or laundress dragged along on what was supposed to be a quick raid. Two guards stood nearby, rifles at the ready, scanning the darkness. From the house, the gunfire intensified, and Samuel saw soldiers moving toward the cabin, drawn by the noise. The camp was lightly guarded now, but those two soldiers could still raise an alarm. Samuel made his choice. He stood, his shotgun held low, and walked toward the wagon with a calm he didn't feel. "Easy, boys," he called, his voice steady. "Major Vance sent me to check on the civilians." The nearest guard hesitated, his rifle half raised. In the dark, Samuel's weathered coat and confident stride could pass for military. "You're not one of ours," the guard said, suspicion creeping into his voice. "No," Samuel admitted, and swung his shotgun, catching the man across the jaw. The second guard raised his weapon, but Neela was already moving, her knife flashing as she took him down silently. The woman with the baby gasped, clutching her child tighter. She was young, barely 20, with eyes wide with fear. "Don't hurt my son," she whispered. "He's all I have." "What's your name?" Samuel asked, keeping his voice low. "Clara Dunn," she said, trembling. "I cook for the men. Major Vance said this was just a routine patrol, said it was safe to bring my boy." Samuel's anger flared. Vance had lied to his own people, turning a mother and child into pawns in his slaughter. "Clara, listen to me. When the shooting starts, you run for those trees." He pointed to a grove beyond the camp. "Follow the creek south to the trading post, 5 miles from here. Tell them Samuel Harrow sent you." She nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "What about you?" Before he could answer, a shout came from the Hausiana's voice, sharp and commanding. "Vance, we have your brother." The words cut through the night, and the soldiers' movements froze. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. Major Vance's voice answered, no longer confident but edged with panic. "Release him, and we'll talk terms." "There are no terms," Neela shouted back. "Only justice for the villages you burned. the families you destroyed. Samuel signaled for Clara to stay low and led Neela and the others back toward the house, moving through the shadows. As they neared, he saw the aftermath of the fight inside. Two Cheyenne women lay dead in the mud, their sacrifice buying time for the others. Inside, Neela stood behind a man in a lieutenant's uniform, her knife at his throat. He was young, mid-20s, with Vance's sharp features but none of his arrogance. His eyes were wide with fear. "He came through the back," Neela explained. "Thought he could flank us. Instead, he gave us leverage." Samuel studied the young man, Lieutenant Daniel Vance, the major's younger brother. "How old are you?" he asked. 24, the lieutenant whispered, wincing as Neela's blade pressed closer. "Old enough to know better," Samuel said. "Did you know what your brother was doing? Burning villages, killing women and children?" Daniel's eyes flickered with doubt. "I thought we were stopping raiders, protecting settlers. That's what he told me." "Your brother lied," Neela said, her voice cold. "We were farmers, not fighters, until he made us fighters." Outside, Major Vance's voice came again, desperate now. "I have 50 men out here. Let my brother go, and I'll let you walk to the border." Samuel snorted. Safe passage from a man who'd built his career on lies and blood. But as he looked at Daniel, he saw something: shock, maybe even shame, as the young man began to grasp the truth. "There's another way," Samuel said to Neela. "We don't kill him. We make him talk." A lieutenant's testimony about his brother's crimes could bring down Vance and everyone who enabled him. "You want me to betray my own blood?" Daniel whispered. "I want you to tell the truth," Samuel said. "The question is whether you're man enough to face it." Before anyone could respond, a new sound broke through the night horses galloping. Voices shouting orders that weren't Vance's. New riders were arriving, their torches brighter, their uniforms different. Federal marshals, maybe, or territorial lawmen. Someone had been watching Vance's raids, and tonight's bloodshed had drawn their attention. As the new riders approached, Samuel realized they might survive this night, but survival would come at a cost. The truth would have to be told, and men like Vance would have to fall. Daniel looked at Neela, then at Samuel, his eyes reflecting the firelight and something else herself. "What do you need me to say?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The marshal's arrival changed everything. Their leader, a grizzled man named Marshal Colton, dismounted and approached the house under a flag of parley. "Major Vance," he called, "this ends now. We've got witnesses to your raids, and we're taking you in." Vance's men hesitated, their rifles lowering as the marshals spread out, outnumbering them. Samuel saw his chance. He stepped onto the porch, Daniel at his side, Neela's knife still close. "Major Vance burned villages and killed innocents," Samuel shouted, his brothers ready to testify to it. The marshals closed in, and Vance's men began to surrender, realizing their commander's lies had unraveled. But Vance himself was nowhere to be seen, had slipped into the darkness, a coward abandoning his men. Samuel knew he'd be back, but for now, the night was theirs. As dawn broke, the marshals took Daniel into custody, not as a prisoner but as a witness. The surviving Cheyenne women were promised protection, though their losses could never be undone. Samuel stood in his ruined doorway, watching Neela prepare to lead her people north. Clara Dunn and her son were safe, headed to the trading post with a marshal escort. "Where will you go?" Samuel asked Neela. "North, to our kin who survived Vance's raids," she said. "We'll rebuild, but not here. Too much death." She paused, studying him. "And you? Your home's gone." Samuel looked at the wreckage of his ranch. "I stopped living here years ago. I think I'll head west, find a place that needs a man who knows how to fight for what's right." Neela nodded, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Clara will need someone to see her safely to Denver. The trail's no place for a woman and child alone." Samuel understood. His new life wouldn't start with running, but with protecting those who needed it most. As the Cheyenne women rode north and Samuel prepared to escort Clara west, the sun rose over a ranch that had seen too much blood, but just enough justice. But the story wasn't over. Major Vance was still out there, a predator in the shadows, and Samuel knew their paths would cross again. The fight for justice had only begun, and it would demand everything he had left. The Wyoming dawn broke over Samuel Harrow's ruined ranch, painting the muddy plains in hues of gold and ash. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the weight of the night's violence. Captain Harrowell's body cooling in the cabin, 2 Cheyenne women dead in the mud, and Major Vance, the true architect of the slaughter, vanished into the shadows. Samuel stood on his porch, shotgun in hand, watching the federal marshals secure the surrendering soldiers. Neela, the Cheyenne leader, stood beside him, her knife still stained with Harrowell's blood. The surviving women of her band prepared to ride north, while Clara Dunn and her infant son, saved from the soldiers' camp, waited for an escort to safety. Lieutenant Daniel Vance, the major's brother, had agreed to testify against his kin. But Samuel knew this wasn't the end. Major Vance was out there, a predator licking his wounds, and the fight for justice was far from over. As the sun climbed higher, Samuel realized the choices made in the coming hours would define not just his life, but the lives of everyone touched by this night. The marshals, led by the grizzled Marshal Colton, moved with grim efficiency, binding the hands of Vance's remaining men. Daniel, pale and shaken, stood under guard, his testimony the key to dismantling his brother's reign of terror. Neela's Womensics now, after the loss of 2 in the fight, gathered their meager belongings, their faces etched with grief but resolute. Leela, the youngest, cradled her baby, whose soft coos were a fragile reminder of hope. Clara Dunn sat on a crate near the marshal's wagon, her son asleep in her arms, her eyes haunted by the night's horrors. Samuel scanned the horizon, his instinct screaming that Vance wouldn't slink away quietly. The major had orchestrated the destruction of Cheyenne villages, used his men's loyalty to cover his crimes, and lied to his own brother to justify murder. A man like that didn't surrender. Regrouped. He's not gone, Samuel said to Neela, his voice low. Vance is out there, waiting for a chance to finish what he started. Neela's eyes narrowed, her hand tightening on her knife. He's a coward, but a cunning one. He'll come for us, or for his brother, to keep his secrets buried. Marshal Colton approached, his boots squelching in the mud. Harrow, you've got a hell of a mess here, he said, gesturing to the wrecked cabin and the bodies being covered with tarps. Lieutenant Vance says you and these women took down Harrowell's squad. Says his brother's been burning villages for months, maybe years. That true? Samuel nodded. Every word. But Major Vance is still loose, and he's not the kind to let witnesses live. Colton's jaw tightened. We've got men scouring the hills, but the storm's washed out tracks. If he's out there, he's got the advantage for now. He glanced at Neela and her women. We'll take these folks to Fort Laramie for protection, but we need you to come with us, Harrow. Your testimony, along with the lieutenants, could bring down half the corrupt officers in the territory. Samuel's gaze drifted to his ranch's splintered door, the bullet-scarred walls, the land he'd poured 12 years of grief into. It wasn't a home anymore, just a graveyard for memories. I'll come, he said, but not yet. Clara and her boy need to get to Denver, and I promise to see them there. Neela's voice cut in, sharp but not unkind. You're a fool if you think Vance won't come for you on that trail. He knows you're part of this now. Then let him come, Samuel said, his voice steady. I've been running from men like him for too long. As the marshals prepared to move out, Samuel helped Clara into the wagon, her son bundled against her chest. Neela and her women mounted horses taken from Vance's men, their faces set with determination to reach their kin in the north. But before they could leave, a sharp whistle pierced the morning air, a signal, clear and deliberate. From the hills beyond the ranch, Samuel's hand tightened on his shotgun. He's here, he said, his eyes scanning the ridgeline. The marshals drew their rifles, forming a defensive line, but the hills were silent, the whistle fading into the wind. Then, from the direction of the dam, came a low rumble, like thunder rolling across the plains. The dam, Neela said, her voice tight. He's trying to flood the valley. Samuel's heart sank. He'd planned to use the dam against Vance's men, but now the major was turning it against them. If the dam broke, the valley would become a churning grave, drowning the marshals, the women, and Clara's child. We have to stop him, Samuel said, already moving toward his horse. Neela, get your people to high ground. Colton, keep Clara and the lieutenant safe. Neela grabbed his arm. You can't go alone. Vance won't be up there by himself. Then come with me, Samuel said. You know how to fight, and I know that dam. We end this together. Neela hesitated, then nodded, signaling Mara and Tana to join them. Sona, the eldest, took charge of the remaining women, leading them and Lila's baby to the hills. Colden protested, but Samuel cut him off. If we don't stop Vance now, none of us make it out of this valley. The four of them, Samuel, Neela, Mara, and Tana, narrowed hard toward the dam, the rumble growing louder as they climbed the muddy slope. The structure loomed ahead, its logs and stones straining under the pressure of the swollen creek. Samuel spotted movement: 3 men, not soldiers but hired guns, working with axes and pry bars to weaken the dam's supports. Major Vance stood above them, a rifle slung over his shoulder, his face twisted with a mix of rage and triumph. There, Samuel pointed, urging his horse forward. The hired guns turned, drawing pistols, but Neela and her women were faster. Mara's knife flashed, catching one man in the throat before he could fire. Tana tackled another, her blade finding his chest in a single, practiced motion. The third man raised his gun, but Samuel's shotgun roared, dropping him into the mud. Vance spun, his rifle coming up, but Neela was already moving, her knife aimed at his heart. He dodged, firing a wild shot that grazed her shoulder. She stumbled but didn't fall, her eyes burning with defiance. You can't kill us all, Vance, she shouted. Your crimes are known now. Vance laughed, a cold, hollow sound. You think those marshals care about a few dead Indians? My brother's word means nothing's weak, always was. And you, rancher, he sneered at Samuel. You're just a fool who opened his door to the wrong people. Samuel raised his shotgun, but before he could fire, a new sound stopped them, a child's cry. Faint but unmistakable, coming from the trees near the dam. Vance's face paled, and Samuel realized the major hadn't come alone. Somewhere in the brush, another innocent was caught in this nightmare, a child. Perhaps another camp followers, left behind in Vance's haste to destroy the evidence of his crimes. We can't let the dam break, Samuel said to Neela, his voice urgent. Not with a child down there. Then we take him now, Neela replied, her shoulder bleeding, but her grip steady on her knife. Mara, Tana, find that child. Samuel and I will handle Vance. The sisters nodded, slipping into the trees as Samuel and Neela advanced on the major. Vance backed toward the dam, his rifle trained on them. You think you've won, he taunted. This dam goes, and your precious witnesses drown. No one will care about your truth then. Samuel's mind raced. The dam was seconds from giving way. The rumble was now a roar, water spraying through cracks in the logs. He saw the dynamite he'd brought, still tucked in his saddlebag, and an idea formed. Neela, keep him talking, he whispered, edging toward his horse. Neela stepped forward, her voice steady despite her wound. You're finished, Vance. Your brother's talking. The marshals are here, and your men are in chains. There's nowhere left to run. Vance's eyes darted to the trees, where Mara and Tana were searching for the child. You're wrong, he said, his voice low. There's always a way out for men like me. He fired, the bullet clipping Neela's leg. But she didn't falter, lunging at him with her knife. Samuel seized the moment, grabbing the dynamite and a match from his saddlebag. He lit the fuse and hurled the stick toward the dam's weakest point, not to destroy it, but to blast away the debris clogging the spillway. If he could redirect the water safely, the valley might be spared. The dynamite exploded with a deafening crack, sending logs and mud flying, but the dam held. Water roared through the open spillway, easing the pressure and flooding a side channel instead of the valley below. Vance cursed, firing again, but Neela was on him now, her knife slashing across his arm. He dropped his rifle, stumbling back, but Samuel was there, his shotgun raised. It's over, Vance, he said. You're done. Before Vance could respond, Mara and Tana emerged from the trees, carrying a small girl no more than 4 wrapped in a tattered blanket. Her mother's dead, Mara said, her voice heavy. Found her by the creek, shot by one of Vance's men. The girl's cries cut through Samuel like a blade, echoing the loss of his own son. He turned to Vance, whose face showed no remorse, only calculation. You'd kill a child to cover your tracks, Samuel asked, his voice shaking with rage. Vance smirked. Collateral damage. You'd understand if you weren't so weak. Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger, but Nilla's hand on his arm stopped him. He's not worth it, she said. Let the marshals have him. Let him face the truth. As if on cue, Colton and his men appeared, drawn by the explosion. They swarmed Vance, binding his wrists as he spat curses. The girl was handed to Clara, who promised to care for her until family could be found. Neela, bleeding but unbowed, watched as Vance was led away, his empire of lies crumbling with every step. The sun was high now, casting long shadows over the ranch. The marshals took Vance and his men to Fort Laramie, where Daniel's testimony would expose a network of corruption that reached the territorial capital. The Cheyenne women, granted federal protection, rode north to rebuild with their kin. Clara and her son, along with the orphan girl, were escorted by Samuel toward Denver, a journey that would mark the start of his new life. As they rode, Samuel looked back at his ranch one last time. The cabin was a wreck, the dam damaged but standing, the land scarred by blood and betrayal. But it had also been the place where he'd remembered who he was, a man who fought for others, who chose humanity over solitude. Weeks later, at a Denver boarding house, Samuel watched Clara and the children settle in. Safe at last, Nilla's words echoed in his mind. The man who lived alone died that night. She was right. The hermit was gone, replaced by a man ready to build something new, to protect those who needed it, to live again. Years later, stories would spread of the night a lone rancher and 9 Cheyenne women stood against an army of liars and won. But those who lived it knew the truth was deeper. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty, it was about choosing to stand, to fight, to be human in the face of inhumanity. Samuel Harrow had made that choice, and it had changed everything. What would you have done in Samuel's place? Would you have opened your door to strangers, knowing it might cost you everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you stand on the line between violence and justice, and how far you'd go to protect the innocent in a world that often rewards the cruel. Your voice matters, and we wanted to hear it.